All right, strap in, everybody. We're about to get biblical, like really biblical.
Oh, yeah, fire and brimstone time.
We're talking Zephaniah, specifically the Book of Zephaniah, chapters 1 through 3. And spoiler alert, this guy does not mess around.
Not even a little bit.
So we'll unpack what he's saying, who he's saying it to, and what it means for, well, us, thousands of years later. Maybe by the end, we'll know if we make Zephaniah's nice list or not.
And what makes it even juicier is the context.
Oh, right. Lay it on us.
Zephaniah's not some lone voice crying out in the wilderness. He's right there in the thick of it. 7th century BC Judah, political drama, religious turmoil, the whole 9 yards. His words are like a time capsule, but with a message that's still, like, shockingly relevant today.
Okay, so time capsule got it. But let's get to the good stuff. I'm talking about the doom and gloom.
Oh, there's plenty of that.
Like right out of the gate, verse 2, God saying, I will utterly consume all things from off the land. I don't know about you, but consume sounds pretty intense. Like fire and brimstone, end of the world kind of intense.
Yeah, you could definitely go for that literal interpretation, right? And it'd be pretty terrifying. But I think Zephaniah's also talking about something deeper. A kind of spiritual consumption. A purging of everything that's pulling Judah away from God.
So like a spiritual detox, but with higher state.
Exactly. It's about getting rid of the junk that's clogging up your soul, the stuff that's keeping you from a true relationship with God.
Okay, I can dig it. But it's not like everyone's getting thrown in the spiritual dumpster fire, right? God seems to have a very specific list of who's in trouble here.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking priests, false worshipers, anyone who's just kind of ignoring God altogether.
Basically, anyone who's chosen to turn away from God, whether actively or just through apathy. Remember, King Josiah was trimming to reform Judah religiously, but there was a ton of pushback.
Yeah, makes sense.
So you've got these priests, supposed to be the spiritual leaders, but they become corrupt, more interested in power than in serving God.
Right, the usual suspects.
Then you've got the false worshipers, people clinging to old ways, maybe even comfortable ways, but ways that lead away from God.
And then the folks who are just like sleepwalking through their faith, not even trying.
Exactly. So Zephaniah's message is like this giant wake-up call. It's like, hey, this isn't a game. Pay attention because your choices have consequences.
Got it. Loud and clear. But then there's this phrase that keeps popping up, the day of the Lord. Sounds pretty ominous. Is this like a literal 24-hour period or something more symbolic?
That's the thing, it can be both. On one hand, Zephaniah could be talking about a specific event, like an invasion or a natural disaster, but he's also tapping into this bigger idea of divine judgment, this cosmic reckoning where everything gets set right.
Whoa, okay, so like the universe hitting the reset button.
Exactly.
And Zephaniah doesn't hold back on the imagery when he's describing this day. We're talking a cry from the fish gate, howling from the hills, darkness and gloom. Honestly, if I was living back then, I'd be hitting the repent button pretty hard.
Oh yeah, he definitely wants to get people's attention. He's laying out the consequences of turning away from God. But it's not just about fear and punishment.
There's more. Because I'm getting some serious anxiety over here.
There is, and this is where things get even more interesting, because it's not just Judah that's in the hot seat. God's got some words for their neighbors too. We're talking Moab, Ammon, the Philistines, even mighty Ethiopia gets called out.
So it's like a regional roast, God's got jokes.
Well, it's not just jokes. See, these nations weren't exactly innocent bystanders. They all had a history of conflict with Judah. But it goes beyond just like political rivalries or border disputes.
Okay, what's a deeper meaning here?
Think about Moab and Ammon. Zephaniah specifically mentions their reproach against Judah. Now, that might sound like, oh, just some ancient trash talk.
Yeah.
But it was more than that. They were mocking God, his people, his promises.
So it's like they're disrespecting the VIP.
Big time. And Zephaniah is saying you don't get to do that and get away with it. It's not just about land or power, it's about something much deeper.
So it's like, mess with the bull, you get the horns.
Exactly. And it's even more specific when you look at the punishments. Like with the Philistines, God says their cities will become dwellings for shepherds, folds for flocks. It's not just random destruction, it's almost poetic, right?
It's interesting.
This land that was once a source of conflict and pain is going to be transformed into a place of peace and abundance for the faithful.
Okay, so there's a method to the madness. It's not just smiting for the sake of smiting.
Right.
But you said Assyria gets called out too, and they were like the superpower back then.
Oh yeah, Assyria was the big dog, the empire everyone feared. Nineveh, their capital, was legendary.
But Zephaniah doesn't flinch.
Not even a little bit. He says God will destroy Assyria, turn Nineveh into a desolation, dry like a wilderness. And the imagery he uses,
Yeah.
flocks lying down in the ruined streets, birds nesting in the rubble. It's like he wants people to picture it. The emptiness, the complete downfall of this seemingly invincible empire.
So much for too big to fail, huh?
Exactly. And I think Zephaniah gives us a clue as to why this is all happening when he says God will famish all the gods of the earth. This isn't just about punishing bad behavior. It's about exposing the emptiness of everything people put their faith in besides God.
So it's like a cosmic reality check.
Totally. Like, look, all those other things you're chasing after, all those false idols, they're nothing compared to God.
Okay, point taken. But why all the destruction? Why couldn't God just, send an email, hey everyone, be good, KFAX?
Because sometimes a strongly worded email just doesn't cut it.
Okay, what are you saying?
Think about it like surgery. Sometimes you need to cut something out, even if it's painful, to allow for healing. And that's what's happening here.
So it's like tough love cosmic edition.
Exactly. God's trying to get our attention, show us that the path we're on leads to destruction. But here's the thing. Amidst all the doom and gloom, there's also this thread of hope running through Zephaniah's message. A promise that even after judgment, there's restoration, there's renewal.
Okay, hold on. We're talking about fire and brimstone, empires falling, cities being wiped off the map. Where's the hope in all that? Who gets to be part of this restoration you're talking about, and what does it actually look like? Because I think our listener could use a little good news right about now.
Oh, there's plenty of good news to come, but we're going to save that for next time. All right, let's dive into that hope, shall we?
Please.
I'm all ears. So remember how Zephaniah went after those specific groups in Judah? The corrupt priests, the folks who were just going through the motions, those chasing after other gods.
Yeah, the ones who got their spiritual wake-up call.
Exactly. Well, they're out. No restoration party for them. But the people who humble themselves, who put their trust in God, they're the ones who get to experience this amazing comeback.
So it's not just about being from Judah, it's about a genuine heart change.
You got it. It's
Good.
like, even if you were one of those folks Zephaniah called out, but you hear his message and actually change your ways, you're back in the game.
Second chances, baby.
Exactly. And what I love is that Zephaniah doesn't just give us vague promises about this restoration. He gets specific, almost poetic, about what it looks like. Remember how he described those Philistine cities becoming dwellings for shepherds?
Yeah, like a post-apocalyptic petting zoo.
Well, not quite. But remember, sheep were a sign of prosperity and blessing in that culture. So he's saying, imagine this. The land that was once a source of conflict, pain. It's going to be overflowing with abundance for God's people.
Okay, so I'm picturing like rolling hills, fluffy sheep, maybe a happy shepherd playing a flute. It's like a biblical travel brochure. But wait, what about Moab and Ammon? They got hit pretty hard too. Is there any hope for them?
That's a bit more complicated. See, their judgment is described a little differently. They get compared to Sodom and Gomorrah, cities known for, well, let's just say, not being on God's good side.
Yeah, not exactly role models.
Right. And Zephaniah says they'll become breeding of nettles, salt pits, a perpetual desolation, basically wasteland. But even here, you can see a hint of, maybe not hope exactly, but a sense of purpose.
Hold on. A wasteland with a purpose. Explain that one.
Well, think about it. Wastelands are empty, right? But emptiness can also be potential. It's a blank slate where something new can be created.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bit optimistic, but I think there's this subtle message that even in the harshest judgments, God can still do something new, something unexpected.
Okay, so even in the salt pits, there's a glimmer of something. Maybe a few scraggly wildflowers pushing up through the cracks. I like that. But let's get back to Assyria. They were like the big bad wolf back then. How does their judgment fit into all of this?
Oh man, this is where Zephaniah really goes all in with the imagery. He describes Nineveh, this grand, powerful city being totally abandoned, flocks grazing in the streets, birds nesting in the palaces, like nature reclaiming what was once a symbol of human dominance.
And that's not by accident, right? He's making a point.
Definitely. Remember we talked about God famishing all the gods of the earth? Well, Assyria was all about power, wealth, their own pantheon of gods.
Like the ultimate flex.
Totally. But Zephaniah is saying all that, it's nothing compared to God. He's showing that even the mightiest empires are fragile, temporary. He's like this cosmic reality check. Don't put your trust in stuff that can be destroyed.
So it's a warning shot for anyone who thinks they're too big to fail. pretty humbling.
For sure.
But I gotta ask, why go through all this? The destruction, the judgment, the upheaval. Why couldn't God just like send a memo, hey, everyone be good, done?
Because sometimes a memo just isn't enough, you know? Like, think of it as surgery. It's painful, it's disruptive, but sometimes it's the only way to remove something harmful and actually allow for healing.
Tough love, but on a cosmic scale.
Right. God's trying to get our attention, show us that the path we're on, it leads to a dead end. But remember, there's that thread of hope running through all this.
Yeah.
A promise that even after judgment, there's restoration. There's renewal.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned that. But after all this talk of fire and brimstone, I need you to spell it out for me. What does this restoration look like?
Okay, picture this.
I'm ready.
God rejoices over his people. He's singing, renewing them with his love. It's like a love song after a fire for those who came out stronger on the other side.
So it's like a second chance, a do-over.
Even better. It's a chance for a deeper, more intimate relationship with God. Because when everything else has been stripped away, the pride, the arrogance, the fake gods, what's left, just you and God. And that's where the real growth, the real transformation can happen.
Wow, okay. That's intense. But it's easy to get caught up in the big picture stuff, empires falling, nations being judged. What about on a personal level? How does all this apply to like our listener going about their day-to-day life?
That's where Zephaniah gets really practical. He talks about this remnant of Judah, the people who stay faithful, humble themselves before God. And they're not just waiting around for the rescue squad. They're actively living out their faith, seeking justice, showing compassion, walking humbly with God.
So it's not just about surviving the judgment, it's about thriving in the middle of it. Like even when things are tough, you can still choose to live in a way that reflects God's character.
Exactly. And that's where I think we can draw some powerful parallels to our lives. We might not be facing like literal armies or crumbling empires,
Right, thank goodness.
but we all have our challenges, temptations, moments where we have to choose between what's easy and what's right. And Zephaniah's message is a reminder that even in those moments, God's with us, offering us strength, guidance, and the hope of something better.
Okay, so we've got this idea of judgment as a refining fire, a way of purifying and preparing us for something new. And we've got this beautiful picture of restoration, God's love pouring out on his people like a healing balm. But Zephaniah doesn't stop there, does he? He keeps talking about this pure language. We touched on it a little earlier, but now that we're in the midst of this whole restoration thing, it feels even more, I don't know, significant.
Oh, you're picking up on something important. And you're right, it does feel more significant in the context of restoration. Because it's not just about speaking the same words, it's about speaking the same truth. It's about understanding God's heart, sharing his values, living in a way that reflects his love and justice.
So it's less about vocabulary, more about alignment, like getting your heart and your mind in sync with God's.
You nailed it. And when that happens, something amazing takes place. Zephaniah says people from all nations will call on the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. Imagine that, different backgrounds, different cultures, all united by this shared understanding of God and how we're supposed to live. It's like a glimpse of heaven right here on earth.
Okay, so we've got judgment, we've got restoration, and we've got this pure language that can unite people across all sorts of boundaries. I'm sensing a theme here. It's almost like Zephaniah is giving us this roadmap for how to navigate the craziness of the world, find hope even when things are tough. But it's not done yet, is he? All this talk about judgment and restoration, it all leads back to Jerusalem, right? The city that's at the heart of it all.
You're right on track. And that's exactly where we're headed next.
Yeah.
Because Zephaniah's message for Jerusalem, it's both the most challenging and the most hopeful part of his whole prophecy.
Okay, we're back. Time to talk about Jerusalem. We've heard about judgment for everyone around Judah, but now Zephaniah turns his attention to the main event. And he doesn't hold back.
No, he does not. He calls Jerusalem filthy, polluted, a city that's totally tuned out God's voice.
Ouch. That's gotta sting.
And what's really interesting is this isn't just about, pagan idols or worshiping the wrong gods. It's deeper. Zephaniah is talking about a rot, a corruption that's infected everything, from the leaders all the way down.
Yeah, he gets really specific, too. He compares the leaders to roaring lions, evening wolves, preying on the very people they're supposed to be protecting. Even the prophets and the priests, the folks who should be like the moral compass, they're called out for being corrupt and hypocritical.
Total system failure. And he connects it directly to this idea of justice.
Okay, how so?
He says the just Lord is in Jerusalem, seeing everything that's going on. God's not fooled by, appearances or empty rituals. He's looking at people's hearts.
Hmm.
and what he sees, well, let's just say it's not pretty.
So it's not enough to just follow the rules or go through the motions. You got to live in a way that reflects God's justice and compassion. And when you've got leaders exploiting people, prophets twisting the truth, priests more interested in power than holiness, yeah, that's not a good look.
Not at all. And it's a reminder that this kind of corruption, it can happen anywhere, anytime. It's not just an ancient problem, it's a human problem. We see it today in our own societies, institutions, maybe even in ourselves.
Oof, that hits close to home. But even though he's dropping some serious truth bombs, Zephaniah doesn't completely abandon the people of Jerusalem, right? There's still that glimmer of hope, that promise of restoration.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we see God's mercy and grace on full display. Zephaniah says, even though judgment's coming, God will leave behind a humble and contrite people. It's like he's sifting through the wreckage, looking for those who are truly repentant, ready to turn back to him.
So it's a second chance, but not a free pass. You got to choose humility, choose to turn away from the stuff that led you astray.
Exactly. It's not about earning God's favor. It's about recognizing your need for him.
Okay, I'm with you. But for those who do make that choice, what happens then?
Well, Zephaniah gives us this incredible picture of what their future holds. He says God will rejoice over them with singing. He'll quiet them with his love. Imagine that God singing over you, calming your fears, surrounding you with his love. That's the kind of restoration he's offering.
Man, that's powerful. It's like everything we've talked about, the judgment, the refining fire, stripping away all the stuff that doesn't really matter, it all leads to this incredibly deep, joyful relationship with God. But there's still one more piece to this puzzle, right? The pure language that Zephaniah keeps coming back to. Where does that fit in?
You know, when we look at it through the lens of Jerusalem's restoration, the pure language takes on a whole new meaning. Because now it's not just about individuals understanding God, it's about a whole community being united by that understanding. It's a shared purpose, a shared commitment to actually living out God's justice and love in the world.
So it's like taking that personal transformation and putting it on a citywide scale. Imagine a whole city, a whole nation speaking this pure language, working together, taking care of each other, pursuing righteousness. That's a pretty radical vision.
Totally radical. And it goes against, everything the world tells us about power and success. But that's what's so beautiful about Zechariah's message. He's pointing us toward a different way of being, a different way of living. He's saying the world's way leads to brokenness, to despair, but God's way, that leads to life, joy, true fulfillment.
So after this whole deep dive into Zephaniah, what are we left with? What's the takeaway for our listener?
I think the biggest takeaway is that God is all about transformation. He's not going to leave us stuck in our mess, our brokenness. He wants to make us new, restore us, bring us back to himself and to each other. And yeah, that process might involve some, tough love, some growing pains, but ultimately it leads to something amazing.
It's a message of hope, and we could all use a little of that these days. So as we wrap up, I want to encourage our listener to really think about what we've talked about. Where do you see yourself in Zephaniah's message? Are you part of the problem or part of the solution? Are you holding on to things that need to be let go? And are you willing to embrace God's grace, even if it means going through some hard stuff to get there?
Great questions to ponder. Because at the end of the day, Zephaniah's message is a call to action. It's a call to step out of the darkness and into the light, to choose humility, to seek justice, to pursue peace. And it's a reminder that even when things seem really dark, God's working behind the scenes, bringing about redemption and renewal.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Zephaniah. We hope it's giving you something to think about. And until next time, keep seeking that pure language.